On today's show, Alex Ovechkin is back in action as he prepares for the 2025-2026 season.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the past 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, the Capitals have added some depth players this summer. Some of the names aren't too familiar, and the most recent addition, Sheldon Rempal, well, he's probably not a name you're familiar with. Get to know him in this episode. A bit later, we'll talk about Evgeny Kuznetsov and the rumblings out there that he might be making his return to the NHL. The Montreal Canadiens seem like they're interested. Would he be a good fit in Montreal? I'll talk about that. But just to get it going here, Ovechkin is back in beast mode as he is preparing for the 2025-2026 season, which very well could be his final season in the NHL. And I've had to do quite a few podcasts this summer. I've been asked to join some shows, and everyone asks about Alex Ovechkin and what is the future beyond this year? What is his future beyond his current contract, as we know, expires at the end of next season? And what I've said on all those shows, I expect that this will be the finale of Alex Ovechkin in the NHL. Listen, he caught and passed Gretzky. He won a Stanley Cup. What is there left for him to prove? He will be 40 years old going into camp. Do you think Alex Ovechkin is going to sign a 1-year deal? Do you think he's going to sign a 3-year deal? Do you think he's going to be playing in the NHL at 43 years old? When you kind of start to connect the dots, there was the email that was sent out to the season ticket holders and then quickly retracted once the Capitals PR department got a hold of it. Then there is his wife saying in Russian media that this would be his final season in the NHL. But then they said, well, she didn't really understand what was being said. I think that, they say where there's smoke, there's fire. And even before the email that went out to the season ticket holders, even before his wife said it was his final season, I think Capitals fans, we need to come to terms with the fact that this is Ovi's final season in the NHL. And he is not taking it easy. He took a short vacation, and as he posted on Telegram, of all places, when you think of social media, you think of Twitter, X, you think of TikTok, Instagram. Oh, no. He posted this on Telegram that he is back in action, hitting it hard in the gym with his personal trainer. And that is where we will start in segment number 1, is Alex Ovechkin getting back into beast mode. And Ovi, the man, the myth, the goal-scoring machine, is back from vacation. And he's already in the gym. And there was some video footage posted of him on various social media platforms that he is back in action with his longtime trainer, Pavel Burlachenko, as he gears up for what very well could be his final season in the NHL. And one of the things he even said last year, going into last season at 39 years old, is he doesn't train the way he did when he's 27 years old. And he is in very good shape. But if you saw pictures of him from this summer already, he he's a little big up front there. He has a bit of a belly going, but I really can't talk as I do as well. But that he is in fairly good shape, but I think that he could definitely tone up as he is preparing what could be his finale in the NHL. But if you think that this is going to be some sad farewell tour, you better think again because Ovi dropped 44 goals this last season. Yeah, 44, and he did it while missing 16 games with a broken leg. That is the third most in the league at 39. That is just, I guess I'm going to say it, absurd. You thought that you would see a bit of dip in production from Alex Ovechkin after getting off to that slow start the season before, but he found his way. And, a lot of people made that connection that had he not missed those 16 games with that leg injury that he faced with Jack McBain, that he probably would have caught and passed Gretzky that much earlier. But he broke that unbreakable record. He's got 897 goals now. The guy's basically rewriting the history books every time he steps on the ice. And, oftentimes we'll talk about the Gretzky record and we'll talk about all of his accomplishments, but there's been a lot of them. When you take a look at the trophy case or the mantle of his accomplishments that he has, there's so many. That is why I draw the connection to that this will be his last season in the NHL. But he said on Telegram, yeah, that's where he updates now. I know it's a very Ovi that he's locked in, motivated, and ready for next year. I expect him to hit the ground running. He said, quote, "I'm going to be 40 and I'm going to try to do my best to play and my team is going to help me to," unquote. And you saw the moves that the Capitals made, or the lack thereof, this summer so far, that they're going to need the leadership of Alex Ovechkin, as I expect this to be a very rookie-laden team that is going to need some guiding voices by who other than the greatest goal scorer of all time, Alex Ovechkin, the captain of your Capitals. And I think that he wants to set a good example. And all things considered, given the fact that, even if when you saw pictures from him last summer, he didn't look like he was in the best shape, that he performed well all season long, even when faced with a very big setback in the broken leg department there. But the scary part is his numbers say he's still elite. He had the highest goals per 60 of his career. His even strength production was top of the league. His shot rate still terrifying. And an interesting fact here as well is Leon Draisaitl, we know the big numbers he put up, was 9 years old when Ovechkin made his NHL debut. Let that sink in. And now they're battling for the league scoring title. So it's interesting, how many years he's been in the league and how many things he's accomplished. And Leon Draisaitl and all that he's accomplished and how young he was is quite something there. But when you want to take a look at it, it hasn't been all, smooth sailing in every aspect of his play on the ice. There has been some defensive slippage. His expected goals numbers weren't pretty. Caps were technically worse defensively when he was on the ice, but it's Ovi. We'll take the trade-off when he's burying number 44. And, talking about Alex Ovechkin and his defensive game, that has kind of been true his entire career, that he has not been the greatest defender. His bread and butter, of course, is, scoring goals. And even when there were points this past season when he wasn't chipping in the goal scoring department, he chipped in other ways, assisting on goals or throwing the body around to try to motivate his players. So Alex Ovechkin oftentimes chips in. If it's not goal scoring, he can do it, like I say, just by being a leader, by leading the physical charge or assisting. That he is still one of the most dynamic players in the league. And you take a look at the numbers that he put up in the playoffs, including the first OT playoff goal of his career. Took him 21 seasons, but he did it. Quite something what he was able to put up. So is this it? Is this the final run? That is the question. And, I listen to the people on social media. They say, well, maybe he'll sign some sort of extension, but search your heart of hearts. What's in it for Ovi? Some people say that he's trying to chase down 1,000 goals, right? But he's not going to be able to get that done in one season at this point. What kind of extension would that look like? So he hasn't said it formally yet. He says he hasn't thought about it, but I'll say this. If this is the end, the dude ain't going out quietly. And, and I think that that's the optics. He's never going to come out and say that this is my final season. He'll say it when the season is done, or maybe, as the season is wrapping up. But if you want to get a chance to see Ovechkin in person, next season is the season to get it done. In a lot of ways, it was last season when he was chasing down Gretzky, but this could very well be the final farewell tour of Alex Ovechkin in the NHL. That would be a great time to see him still knock out all the accomplishments that he wants to get done. All right, so coming up here after the break, can you believe we're still talking about Evgeny Kuznetsov on the Capitals player assistance program, Carolina, Russia, and now back to the NHL? I'll discuss straight ahead. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And the thing I like about it is I could see where I was spending money in the wrong places. I realized I was spending too much money on going out to eat or food delivery. Now I don't do that. And if you have a significant other in your life, you can plan your financial future together. That is what I love about Monarch, and I think that you will too. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me over on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in segment 2 here, we're talking about Kuzy yet again. This guy will not go away. He will not be denied, and it has to be kind of trying to be his agent as, oh my God, what is this guy doing now? He wanted to be in the NHL, and then he wanted to go to the KHL, and now he wants to go back to the NHL again, and he is not going to accept a PTO. This guy is a lot of extra, as they say, and that is definitely what Kuzy is, and he still, in his heart of hearts, considers himself as a premier NHL player. Delusional, maybe, but the guy does have some skills. Does he still have enough skills in his skill set to be a viable option in the NHL? There's rumblings. They say where there's smoke, there's fire in Montreal. Could that be a good fit? That is what we'll talk about in segment number 2, as Kuzy, the guy that, well, just won't go away. The enigma, the smile, the silky mitts is reportedly mulling over a few offers, and one of them might be the Montreal Canadiens, the Habs. That's right, according to a Russian outlet, RG, Kuzy's camp is in talks with multiple teams, and Montreal is on that list. Now listen, Montreal, I don't think you want any piece of that action. I saw how your team played last year. Not too bad. I don't think you want to add what I'm going to call a guy that has some issues, shall we say, to the mix. So yeah, picture Kuzy back in the NHL, but this time playing up north in Montreal. And you take a look at it, the Habs came off a surprising appearance in the playoffs under the leadership of a surprising head coach in Martin St. Louis. And they're looking to add depth down the middle. And you know what? It kind of makes sense to a certain extent. They got a few question marks in their lineup. Kirby Dach's knee, that's a big one. Nick Suzuki's a stud, but behind him, it's a little thin. And could they view Evgeny Kuznetsov, former first round pick, drafted in the first round, could he be a viable option for Montreal? Now, listen, he doesn't want to join a team, which I'll talk about here in a minute, as a PTO. He would be an expensive depth move, in my opinion. But the one thing about Kuzy is he can turn it on when he wants to. It's just that sustained pressure, that sustained great play that has been detrimental his entire NHL career. You saw the numbers that he put up in Russia. Not too much better. Kuzy's agent said he is not signing a professional tryout. This is not going to be one of those try it and earn it situations. He is too good for that. They're looking for a real deal. It won't be $8 million like the last one, but his agent says it could be a steal. So this guy is still full of drama and still thinks that he is deserving of an NHL contract. Now, listen, is he probably like a third or fourth liner? Probably at this point. You saw the diminished returns on the Capitals. He showed glimpses of greatness in his short foray with the Carolina Hurricanes, and his numbers in Russia, well, they weren't glowing either. So let's take a look at it. Is he the right fit to even play in the NHL, and where is his head at? So let's say it. Where's his head at? Is it still in hockey? And that's a big if. He could be a fun fit on a team in the NHL, like the Canadiens. Young guys like Demidov. Oh, yeah, they were line mates in the KHL with the SKA. And just having Demidov and Kuznetsov, two Russian countrymen together, that could be an interesting dynamic. That's instant chemistry. And, one of the things we talked about with the Capitals and, last year, why they didn't make any moves was the chemistry and the vibes. It's something that's all a buzz in the NHL nowadays. So they would have that instant chemistry. But we've been burned before. We've seen good Kuzy and less good Kuzy, shall we say. Still, you take a look at it. The Canadiens could do worse, especially if the price is right. So something I will continue to keep monitoring, even though he hasn't been a Capital. Still, was a big piece at some time, and it's an interesting storyline to follow, at least through the summer months, about will he get an NHL deal? What team is willing to take a flyer on a guy that you got to think, the teams, they had to have looked at the back of his hockey card and said, wow, this guy has had some issues. Do we want to take a bet on him? I think there probably is a team out there. Would the Montreal Canadiens be willing to pull the trigger on him? I guess time will only tell. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about the Capitals have made a lot of acquisitions this summer, and some of them were kind of unknown. Some of them are, slated to play in Hershey. Some are slated to play in the Capitals. But the most recent addition, Sheldon Rempal, you probably aren't too familiar. I'll catch you all up straight after the break. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. So in the final segment of the show, there's been quite a few additions. I'm talking about Declan Chisholm. I'm talking about the players that we added in Hershey. That the most recent addition, Sheldon Rempal, kind of fits into the category of, in the narrative, in the storyline of the Capitals this summer. They have made acquisitions, but most of them you have to kind of dig deep to say, who in the world are half of these players? Sheldon Rempal is definitely one of those players, but a guy that could be a sneaky good move for Hershey. And if he plays his cards right and plays very well, could be a great depth piece for the Capitals. Let's get to know Sheldon Rempal together. Let's dive into that in the final segment of the show. So you take a look at the Capitals and what they've tried to do this summer. They went after Ehlers. They went after Roslovic and, a lot of other players that we're probably not aware of. And we're getting to the point that they're digging deep. When I take a look at my phone and I say the Capitals have acquired, I get excited. I take a look at it. I'm like, who is it? This great player. And the most recent one we find out is Sheldon Rempal. has a brief history in the NHL, primarily playing over in Russia, a little bit of AHL, that kind of stuff. But Sheldon Rempal signed a 1-year, two-way deal, and no, he's not expected to be a game changer in DC. But don't sleep on him, as he could be a sneaky good move. Now, Rempal, 29 years old, 5'10", $170, soaking wet, and yeah, he's bounced around LA, Carolina, Vancouver, Vegas, just 21 total NHL games total. So not flashy, but what's in it? What did the Capitals see in this Sheldon Rempal character? But look at his numbers. Last year in the KHL, 61 points in 68 games. He led the entire league in playoff scoring with 21 points in 19 games. That's not nothing. So, you take a look at what the Capitals have done and them trying to restock the pond in Hershey. I think that is ultimately what this will be. But listen, he could surprise us. He could light it ablaze down in Hershey and give the Capitals a good option, at minimum, a good depth piece. But you take a look at that. Before that, 3 straight 25-goal seasons in the AHL. He torched teams like Abbotsford, like dudes an all-star AHL type. I think he's got it in his skill set. I watched some video, took a look at, the stats, the analytics behind him, and you can only read so much into that. There were some flashy plays that I saw in the KHL, and I saw him score a couple goals, or I saw him score a goal in the NHL. And, looked okay. There's not a whole lot you can read into a guy that doesn't have a big history in the NHL. I saw what he did in the KHL. Not too bad. So the big question, of course, as I hear from Capitals fans that they're waiting for that big move, why sign him? Well, the Hershey Bears signing, this is about depth. Like I said, this is about having a vet in the system who can fill in during a call-up crunch time or provide some offense for young guys down in Chocolatetown. And, he has the history. And like I said, they are trying to restock the pond down in Hershey. He could be a good move. And like I say, if he catches fires, who knows? He scored twice for the Golden Knights 2 years ago. Maybe he snags a cup of coffee with the big club. But make no mistake, he's here to help Hershey in their quest for another Calder Cup. So we're all dreaming about Ovi's goal and wondering where Kuzy lands. Sheldon Rempal's going to show up at camp, go to work, and quietly be a factor down the depth chart. And that's the one thing that the Capitals have done this offseason, as they have stockpiled maybes, a lot of maybes, Justin sort of. He is going to be an NHL player, says Chris Patrick. And you take a look at the depth move on defense and Declan Chisholm, that if you were looking for an oh wow moment this summer, like that was the move that is going to change the Capitals in the 25-26 season, this is not it, at least for now. Again, like some of these could be sleeper moves that catch us by surprise, right? But it's an about face from what we saw from the Capitals last summer, where, Brian McClellan just came out swinging with Pierre-Luc Dubois and Chychrun and Roy and Logan Thompson, and just really made a statement that, he was going to make a change. And, to be clear, last summer, I wasn't exactly jumping up and down when I heard the Capitals acquired Taylor Radish. Sometimes these moves are, something that we don't understand, that the amateur guys are looking into, as there are a lot of tiers to this. There was a lot of questions about why the Capitals went all in on Justin sort of. And then you find out that there was supposedly, according to Chris Patrick, a bit of a feeding frenzy, that the Capitals wanted him. But then they found out that there's another team offering him 2 draft picks or 1 draft pick. So we have to offer him 2 draft picks. It is interesting that these moves that, if Brian McClellan said the moves last summer were risky, well, these are even riskier moves. Because the Capitals are kind of laying themselves out to be a youth-driven team. That very well might pay off well, or it could go in the other direction. But I think the message is clear that there is not going to be that big acquisition that's going to swoop in and ostensibly fix this team. And to be clear here, I don't think Jack Roslovic would have been that guy. I think Ehlers could have been. I think that some of the other bigger players that signed with organizations around the NHL could have been. But I think the Capitals have pushed all their chips in on this youth movement with some guys that are flying under the radar. I'm talking about Chisholm. I'm talking about Sortov. I'm talking about Rempal here, that you're going to have to take a deep, deep dive to find out, very little to any information about these players. Some guys that on paper have some good upside, but I guess that remains to be seen. It is an exciting time to be a Capitals fan at the end of the day, as we've heard about for years and years and years that it's going to be the youth, and it's going to be bringing in these players to make this team a viable option to try to chase down the playoffs and a Stanley Cup. Is this youth-laden team going to do it, or the Capitals going to take a step back this season as this whole thing develops and takes root? That is the question. A fun storyline going into the fall. What kind of impact will Sheldon Rempal and the depth moves down in Hershey? What kind of moves will Sortov and Chisholm? Will those moves pay dividends for the Capitals this season? It will be a fun storyline to follow. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On NHL, as they have you covered 5 days a week, available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.